The iron gate moaned when it slid open, a sound I'd always loved because it meant the lake was seconds away and the world would finally go quiet. Pines stitched a dark green seam around the drive, and the stone path I'd laid with my own hands glinted in the late afternoon light. This place was supposed to be sanctuary, a weekend of coffee on the terrace, a paperback I'd pretend I wasn't rereading, and the ghost of my wife, Elizabeth, warming the space beside me the way memory does. But before the car even rolled to a stop, my stomach tightened. The front veranda was dressed like a stranger. My wicker set, sun-faded and familiar, was gone, replaced by a sculptural rattan sectional with linen cushions I never bought. The old brass lanterns I polished every spring had been swapped for black steel sconces that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Even the doormat had changed. Memory isn't always reliable, sir. Maybe you don't recall. I slammed my hand against the coffee table, rattling the crystal vase they'd planted in the center. Don't you dare. Don't you dare stand in my house and call me confused. Kelly's face hardened. Dad, she said slowly, like she was talking to a child. This isn't up for debate. You signed. It's finished. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Signed? My name had been there, in black ink, but I knew, God help me, I knew I had never signed away my wife's dream, my legacy. You forged it. My voice was low, but even. You and your husband, that's the only explanation. Her laugh, short, cruel, cut the air. Good luck proving that. I froze. She didn't deny it. Not really. She just dismissed it, as if my outrage were irrelevant. My daughter, the child Elizabeth nursed through fevers, the girl I taught to ride a bike on these very stone paths, looked at me like I was nothing more than a legal inconvenience. They mistake my kindness for weakness, I muttered, a phrase I'd used years ago in business disputes, but never imagined applying to my own blood. Kelly rolled her eyes. Stop with the speeches. You've had a good run, Dad. Let it go. The strangers, potential buyers, returned from the terrace just then, their eyes politely averted, but their smirks betraying amusement at the family drama. One of them even whispered, seller's remorse, as though I were just another stubborn old man too late to stop progress. Palmer shook their hands confidently, assuring them, we'll finalize soon. My daughter beamed at him like a conspirator. I wanted to scream, to drag them all out into the driveway and lock the gates behind them, but my body betrayed me with stillness. Rage had frozen into something colder, sharper. A realization was threading itself through the fog. If they had my signature, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't confusion. It was a plan. I turned toward the Smart Coast folder again, heart pounding. My fingers flipped past the seller's sheet, past the commission notes, and then I saw it. An exact replica of my signature, dated 3 months ago, neatly aligned on a deed transfer page. My pulse roared in my ears. That was the same month I'd been sick with pneumonia, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold a pen. My heart started racing when I realized the signature wasn't mine at all. It was my sickness they'd studied, my weakness they'd practiced until they could forge me perfectly, which meant this betrayal hadn't been a mistake of impulse. It had been planned for years. I left that villa half in a daze, the late evening sun slanting low across the lake like a wound refusing to close. I drove home with the radio off, headlights cutting tunnels through the dark pines, my hands stiff on the wheel. The road twisted like my thoughts, pulling me back to memories I had spent years trying to keep tender, not poisoned. The first image that came unbidden was Elizabeth, her laugh, warm and alive, echoing through the unfinished villa, while dust hung like gold in the air. She was wearing those old denim overalls, hair tied back, standing barefoot on plywood floors. "This will be our forever," she'd said, brushing a streak of sawdust across her cheek. "We'll grow old here, David, you and me." And I'd believed her. I had built every beam, every railing, every dock plank, with that promise driving me forward. Even after the diagnosis, after the chemo drained her strength, she insisted on weekends at the villa. She wanted Kelly to see the sunsets over the water, to remember them when she was grown. I promised Elizabeth that I'd keep it safe, keep it for Kelly, because family was supposed to be sacred, but promises are only as strong as the people they're handed to. I remembered how, during Elizabeth's final months, Kelly insisted on helping me with finances. "Dad, you've got enough to handle with Mom," she'd said, her hand warm over mine. Let me take care of the bills, the accounts. You can trust me. And I had. God help me, I had. Now, replaying it, I felt a gnawing ache in my gut. How many papers had I signed back then? My vision blurred with tears, my mind exhausted from hospital vigils. I thought I was saving time. Maybe I was giving her practice. The tremor in my hands came back as I poured myself a drink at the kitchen counter. The whiskey smelled like ash and regret. I stared at Elizabeth's photo on the mantel, her smile frozen in softer times. Did I raise her wrong? I asked the empty room. Or did grief blind me? But the house gave no answers, only silence, heavy and judgmental. That night, I dug through the old oak desk in my study. Years of receipts, mortgage statements, medical bills, layer after layer of sacrifice pressed flat between folders. I searched for the original villa deed, the one Elizabeth and I had tucked into a safety deposit box after we paid off the loan. My fingers shook as I found the envelope, but when I tore it open, my stomach dropped. The deed wasn't there. Instead, I found statements, bank statements, 2 years' worth. My eyes darted over the numbers, and each line was another knife. Withdrawals I didn't make, transfers I never authorized, $20,000 here, $35,000 there. Over time, nearly $847,000 had bled from my accounts. Kelly hadn't just taken the villa. She'd been siphoning my life savings, quietly, methodically. I sank into the leather chair, the air knocked out of me. Betrayal doesn't come all at once. It drips, it erodes, it hollows you until one day you realize the floor is gone beneath you. For a long time, I sat there, staring at the statements, the ink blurring through wetness in my eyes. My own daughter had been planning this, maybe even before Elizabeth died. And Palmer, the smirk, the certainty. Of course he was in on it. He was the perfect parasite, and Kelly had opened the vein. I thought about Sophie, my granddaughter. Sweet, shy Sophie, who still asked me about her grandma's recipes. Did she know? Was she just a pawn in their game? Or was she blissfully unaware of the rot under her parents' smiles? My chest tightened. If they could do this to me, what else were they capable of? What else had I not seen while clinging to the illusion of family loyalty? I pressed the bank statements flat on the desk, my hand trembling over the columns of theft. A chill swept through me, so sharp it felt like the room had dropped 10 degrees. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized Kelly hadn't just betrayed me in a moment of weakness. She and Palmer had been dismantling my life, piece by piece, while I was still grieving Elizabeth. And if I didn't act soon, there'd be nothing left of me at all. The phone rang late on a Tuesday evening, its shrill tones slicing through the quiet of my study. I had been staring at those cursed bank statements again, the ones that mapped out my daughter's theft like a trail of rot across 2 years. My first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't think I had the strength to hear her voice, but something in me, a stubborn, bruised part that still wanted to believe my little girl could be saved, made me answer. Dad, Kelly's voice was sharp, rehearsed, like she was already on stage. I need you to hear this from me before you see it in writing. My grip on the receiver tightened. What now, Kelly? She sighed as if I were an obstacle, not her father. The villa belongs to Palmer's parents now. I signed it over. They'll be moving in this weekend. My chest constricted. You did what? You're forbidden from going there anymore, she continued, her words as casual as if she were reading off a grocery list. It's theirs now. I could hear Palmer's voice faint in the background, coaching her, feeding her lines. My heart thudded, each beat a hammer strike against my ribs. That villa was your mother's dream, I said, forcing each word through a throat that wanted to close. It was built with her hands, her laughter. You have no right. Kelly's laugh was short and bitter. Dad, it's just property. You're clinging to the past. We're moving forward. Just property. Elizabeth's voice, promising forever, echoed in my memory. My daughter's dismissal felt like a knife, twisting in the softest part of me. I'll take this to court, I said, my voice low, a promise more than a threat. You'll lose, she snapped back instantly. The documents are signed. You signed them willingly. Everything is in order. My blood ran cold. You know damn well I never signed. Good luck proving that. Her words hung there, smug and final, like a cell door slamming shut. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, as though sheer force could bridge the abyss between us. Kelly, look at what you're doing. To me, to your family, to your mother's memory. You're burning everything for their approval. I'm protecting my future, she said. Her voice softened for half a second, the way she used to sound when asking for money in college, but it hardened again just as quickly. And you'd do the same if you weren't so sentimental. The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear faint laughter in the background, Palmer's parents maybe, celebrating their acquisition of my life's work. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. Listen carefully, Dad, Kelly finally said. Instead of the weathered welcome, Elizabeth chose our first summer here, a new one announced, in cursive. Our happy place. Ours. Whose ours? I killed the engine and listened. Laughter, bright, practiced, floated from inside. I left my bag in the back seat and climbed the steps that had creaked under Elizabeth's bare feet for 20 years. Through the open door, I saw them first. Two strangers in navy blazers roaming my living room, phones up, murmuring great light and killer view. Beyond them, my daughter Kelly leaned against the stair rail, casual as a realtor on a Sunday. Palmer, her husband, hovered near the mantel, thumbs flying across his phone. Dad, Kelly said, as if I'd shown up uninvited to a neighbor's barbecue. You should have texted. I did, I said, hearing how small my voice sounded in my own home. Yesterday, I said I'd be here by 4. Palmer glanced up, offering the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Hey, sir. Sir. If you try to interfere, if you make this messy, you'll regret it. Palmer's parents are well connected. You don't want to fight them. Threats now from my own daughter. I swallowed hard, forcing steel into my voice. They mistake my kindness for weakness, but they're about to find out just how wrong they are. Don't be dramatic, she muttered, and then the line clicked dead. For a long moment, I stared at the silent receiver, my reflection faint in the study window. Behind me, Elizabeth's photo caught the glow of the desk lamp. Her eyes seemed to watch me, to whisper that the line had been crossed and there was no way back. The ache in my chest grew heavier, but under it, something else stirred, a sharp, focused clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of grief was lifting, and what it revealed was rage, controlled, deliberate. I returned the receiver to its cradle and sat back, chest rising and falling like I had run a marathon. The villa, the money, even my dignity, everything had been targeted, stolen, stripped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. My heart started racing when I realized Kelly hadn't simply chosen her husband's family over me. She had declared herself my enemy. And in that moment, I understood. To survive this, I would have to fight my own daughter. The morning after Kelly's call, I woke with a start long before sunrise, my mind buzzing with a single thought: proof. If I could put my hands on the original villa deed, the one Elizabeth and I tucked away in a safety deposit box years ago, everything Kelly and Palmer had fabricated would collapse. I skipped breakfast, threw on yesterday's clothes, and drove downtown as the city yawned awake. The bank's marble facade loomed like a fortress, but inside the sterile lobby, the security guard barely glanced at me as I signed in. My heart thumped with each step down the narrow hallway lined with deposit boxes, my key cold in my hand. The manager escorted me to a small, private room. The air smelled faintly of metal and paper, the kind of scent that carried both reassurance and dread. I slid the key into the box lock, my hands trembling, and pulled the heavy drawer free. My breath caught. The envelope was there, thick and familiar, sealed with Elizabeth's handwriting, her looping cursive that still had the power to undo me. For a moment, I almost believed everything would be fine, that the nightmare would unravel the second I held the deed aloft in court. I opened the envelope with reverence, careful not to tear the paper. But the weight was wrong. Too light. I pulled out the contents and froze. Not a deed, not the embossed certificate with our names. Instead, bank statements. Page after page, neatly stacked. I blinked, confused, then skimmed the numbers. My stomach lurched. These weren't random statements. They were mine, but they told a story I hadn't dared imagine. Transfers of $20,000, $35,000, $50,000. Each withdrawal precise, clinical. Over 2 years, nearly $847,000 drained from my accounts. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Elizabeth's voice echoed in my head. Promise me you'll protect what we built. But I hadn't protected it. I'd delivered it into the hands of my own daughter. I shuffled the papers with shaking fingers. Each line was another betrayal. Transfers timed perfectly around the days I'd been at the hospital, when I was weakest, distracted, drowning in grief. Kelly had waited for my defenses to crumble, then struck where it would hurt most. I sank into the chair, my chest heaving. I remembered Kelly insisting she'd handle the accounts after Elizabeth's treatment started. How she smiled, almost relieved, when I agreed. I thought it was love. Now I saw it for what it was, opportunity. Palmer's voice echoed in my memory. The paperwork's already done. Done indeed. They hadn't just stolen my villa. They'd been bleeding me dry, siphoning away the marrow of my life until I was left hollow. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. A stranger could have robbed me, and I'd have been furious. But my own flesh and blood, the little girl I carried on my shoulders through county fairs, who clutched my hand at Elizabeth's funeral, she had gutted me from the inside. I pressed the bank statements flat on the table. My breath fogged the cold air of the room. Every fiber of me wanted to storm over to their house, slam the papers down, and demand answers. But another part, calmer, darker, knew better. Rage alone wouldn't save me. I needed a strategy. Still, questions tore at me. If Kelly had stolen this much, where had it gone? Was it Palmer's doing, or was she the architect all along? And most of all, why hide the statements in my safety deposit box? Was it arrogance, or had she assumed I'd never think to check? I rubbed my temples, the edges of the pages cutting into my palms. Elizabeth's photo surfaced in my mind again, her steady gaze an anchor. She would want me to fight, not lash out blindly, but fight smart, fight fair, and reclaim what mattered. I gathered the papers back into the envelope, sealing it shut with trembling hands. My path was clear. I had to expose them, not just for me, but for Elizabeth. I rose to leave, but before sliding the box back into the wall, something on the last page made me stop cold. It wasn't a transfer. It was a notation, a name. Palmer's mother, Rita. Funds had been funneled directly to her business, Rita Hale Senior Care Consulting. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized this wasn't just my daughter's betrayal. It was an entire operation. Kelly hadn't just stolen from me. She had delivered me into the hands of predators who had likely done this to others before. I left the bank with the envelope pressed to my chest, as though holding it close could keep me from collapsing on the sidewalk. The September air felt wrong, too warm, too bright for what I had just uncovered. My own daughter had drained my savings, yes, but the last page of those statements, that name, Rita Hale, Palmer's mother. I couldn't shake it. I'd met Rita twice, maybe 3 times. Once at the wedding, where she'd given Kelly a pearl bracelet and whispered in her ear like a general issuing commands. Once at a barbecue, where she paraded Palmer around like a prize bull. She had the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that said she was already calculating her next move while you were still finishing your sentence. Senior Care Consulting. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. I knew what it meant. They had chosen their victims carefully. The elderly, the grieving, the vulnerable, people like me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my study with Elizabeth's photo watching over me, the bank statements spread out across the desk like a battlefield map. The withdrawals weren't random. They followed a pattern, always after hospital visits, always when I was weakest. Someone had been keeping track. I needed more, proof, something beyond my suspicion. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office, a squat brick building that smelled faintly of old paper and dust. The clerk behind the counter looked barely out of college, but she smiled politely when I asked to see property transfers in the last 5 years under the name Hale. She tapped away at her keyboard, then frowned. "That's unusual," she murmured. "There are several." Several. She printed a stack of documents and slid them across the counter. I flipped through them, my pulse quickening with each page. 3 properties, all belonging to elderly owners, all transferred into the hands of Rita Hale or her so-called consulting company. One signature was shaky, barely legible. Another had been contested but dismissed due to lack of evidence. And then, my villa. The pattern was undeniable. I thanked the clerk and walked out into the sunlight, but the warmth did nothing to thaw the ice crawling up my spine. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was organized elder fraud, systematic, practiced, predatory. Kelly hadn't simply betrayed me. She had become part of a machine designed to strip the vulnerable of everything they loved. I thought of the other victims. Did they have daughters too, who smiled while they signed away their parents' lives? Did they also sit at kitchen tables, blindsided by numbers they didn't understand until it was too late? The weight of it pressed down on me, but beneath it, something stirred. Rage, yes, but also resolve. I couldn't undo what Kelly had done, but I could make damn sure she and her new family didn't do it again. Still, the thought of my own child, my little girl with skinned knees and popsicle-stained lips, standing shoulder to shoulder with predators like Rita, it twisted inside me until I could hardly breathe. Driving home, I passed the lake road. I slowed, almost turning in, but forced myself to keep driving. That villa wasn't mine right now, not in practice. As if we'd met at a car dealership, I took in more of the room, and shock sharpened into something like disorientation. My leather reading chair, the one Elizabeth insisted we keep even when it grew shabby, was missing. The bookcases had been rearranged, family photos replaced by generic coastal prints in white frames. And on the coffee table, a glossy folder with a gold logo I recognized from downtown, Smart Coast Realty. A woman in the blazer flashed me a brochure. We love the step terrace and those French doors. Such an easy sell. Sell? Out, I said before I knew I was speaking. Everyone out. Dad? Kelly's voice went cool, the way it used to when she wanted the car keys at 17. We're handling the sale. It's not a big deal. Sale of what? I asked, though the words tasted like metal. This is my villa. She lifted one shoulder. You hardly come anymore. We've updated a few things to maximize buyer interest. If I set foot on that dock, they'd twist it against me, call it trespassing. No, if I was going to reclaim what was mine, it had to be by the book, every step documented, every move airtight. I gripped the steering wheel harder. They wanted me to feel old, weak, beaten. But they had underestimated me. They had forgotten that I once built empires brick by brick, that I knew how to fight battles without lifting a sword. Back in my study, I spread the property records beside the bank statements. The evidence was growing, and so was the storm in my chest. My heart started racing when I realized this wasn't just theft. It was a network, a machine. And if Palmer's family had done this to 3 others before me, it meant there were more victims waiting to fall. Unless I stopped them. Sleep abandoned me completely after what I uncovered at the recorder's office. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows shifting with each passing car on the street. Elizabeth's side of the bed remained untouched, as it had for years, but that night it felt like an accusation. I'd promised her I would keep our daughter safe, keep our family whole. Instead, Kelly had become the very knife that cut me open. By dawn, I was at the kitchen table, papers spread in front of me, bank statements, property records, fragments of my life reduced to evidence of betrayal. My hands shook not from age, but from fury. If Kelly thought I would crumble under this weight, she'd forgotten who raised her. But anger wasn't enough. I needed clarity, strategy, proof no one could dismiss as the ramblings of a grieving old man. That was when I called Frank Daly, a private investigator I'd known years back through Martin. He specialized in financial fraud and had a reputation for finding threads even the police missed. When I explained the situation, his voice went quiet on the other end of the line. Elder fraud rings are more common than you think, he said. If what you're telling me is accurate, you're not their first mark. I'll dig. Within days, Frank delivered more than I expected. First, he confirmed Rita Hale's senior care consulting business wasn't what it seemed. On paper, it offered financial planning and housing advice for retirees. In practice, it was a pipeline. Identify wealthy but vulnerable seniors, insert themselves into their finances, then drain them dry under the guise of help. I flipped through the folder Frank handed me. Photographs, tax filings, testimonies whispered by neighbors. The picture formed with chilling clarity. Rita was the spider, Palmer the smiling bait. Ann Kelly, the daughter who should have defended me, was the web that caught me. But the worst detail? Frank's notes showed that Rita's company targeted clients when they were weakest, after hospital stays, during grief, after sudden medical diagnoses. They had been circling me like vultures while Elizabeth was dying, The air left my lungs. My knees buckled and I sat heavily in the study chair. Frank didn't soften the blow. "You were profiled," he said. "They study habits, medical records, even social media. You fit the perfect mark: widowed, financially comfortable, emotionally vulnerable. Kelly just made it easier." My throat burned and I gripped the edge of the desk. My own daughter delivered me to them. Frank didn't reply. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. That night, I tried again to sleep, but instead, I found myself pacing the house like a restless ghost. Memories surfaced unbidden. Kelly, age 10, falling asleep against my shoulder during fireworks at the lake. Kelly, age 16, begging me to trust her when she swore Palmer was different. Kelly, age 20, standing at her mother's funeral, hand trembling in mine. Had all of that been lies, or had she changed along the way, seduced by money and Palmer's family promises? I returned to my desk, staring down at Frank's folder. Among the documents was a flyer for Rita's company. The tagline leapt out at me: "We take care of your future so you can live in peace today." My stomach turned. That was Elizabeth's phrase. She used to tell me, "Build today so Kelly has peace tomorrow." Had Kelly told Rita? Had she handed over even her mother's words, selling family memories the way she sold off the villa? My chest felt hollow, my heartbeat echoing in the emptiness. A cold wave of understanding washed over me as I realized this wasn't just fraud. It was ritualized exploitation. They had studied me, targeted me, dismantled me by design. And the cruelest truth, my daughter had been the one to open the door and invite them in. Frank's findings lit the fire. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed something that could withstand the scrutiny of a judge, something undeniable. That's when Martin, my old friend and retired prosecutor, suggested I hire a handwriting expert. "Forgery cases hinge on detail," he said over coffee at my kitchen table. "If they mimicked your signature, we'll prove it. And if we prove it, we'll bury them." I contacted Dr. Elaine Park, a forensic document examiner with 30 years in the field. She spoke with the calm precision of a surgeon, every word measured. "Bring me everything with your signature on it," she instructed. "Checks, letters, tax forms, anything." 2 days later, I sat in her office, the air humming with fluorescent lights. My hands fumbled as I handed over a folder stuffed with samples. Dr. Park adjusted her glasses, laying my documents beside the supposed deed transfer Kelly had filed. Her eyes flicked across the pages with unnerving speed, her pen scratching notes in the margin. Finally, she looked up. "This is not your signature," she said flatly. I exhaled so sharply it hurt. "You're certain?" She slid the documents closer. "See this stroke here? The hesitation? And this loop? It's consistent with imitation, not natural flow." She circled areas with a red pen. "Someone traced your style, but they lacked the fluidity of a genuine hand." I leaned forward, my pulse hammering. "So it's a forgery." "Yes," she said, "but there's more." She pulled out a magnified scan of the deed. "Notice the tremor in the downstroke of your D? Whoever forged this studied a period when your handwriting was weakened." Her words hit me like a blow. She pulled another sheet from the folder, an old check I'd signed 2 years ago, during the pneumonia that left me bedridden. My hand had shaken so badly back then that even signing a grocery check was a struggle. "The forged signature matches the tremor from that period almost exactly," Dr. Park continued. "They didn't just copy your signature. They copied your weakness. They must have studied documents from when you were ill." I gripped the arm of the chair until my knuckles whitened. "You're telling me this wasn't sloppy. It was planned." "Meticulously," she confirmed. Elizabeth's face flashed in my mind, her hand on mine in the hospital, her voice urging me to rest. I thought I was protecting Kelly by letting her manage bills during that time. Instead, I had handed her the very key to my undoing. "Can you prove this in court?" I asked. Dr. Park nodded. "Absolutely. I'll testify myself if necessary. This isn't just forgery, it's exploitation." The word hung heavy in the air. Exploitation. My daughter hadn't stumbled into temptation. She hadn't been manipulated in some fleeting moment. She had weaponized my grief, my illness, my trust. I left the office with copies of Dr. Park's report tucked under my arm, the city buzzing around me as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. The villa wasn't just stolen property anymore. It was evidence in a crime. Driving home, my hands shook on the wheel. Every mile felt like peeling back another layer of denial. I thought of Kelly practicing my signature when she was little, mimicking the way I wrote grocery lists, giggling when she got the loops right. Back then, it was innocent. Now I wondered if that memory had been twisted into a rehearsal for betrayal. By the time I reached my driveway, dusk had settled. I sat in the car, staring at the stack of papers on the passenger seat, unable to move. Elizabeth's voice whispered in the back of my mind, "Fight smart, David. Don't let them win." I closed my eyes, gripping the wheel tighter, and promised her silently I wouldn't let them. Shock coursed through me as I realized my own illness. The season of weakness I thought I'd survived had been studied, cataloged, and used as the template for the very signature that stole my life. This wasn't just fraud, it was premeditated betrayal. The weight of Dr. Park's report pressed against my chest the whole drive home. Heavier than any anchor I'd ever carried, I had proof now. Real, undeniable proof. But evidence alone couldn't shield me from the storm Kelly and Palmer's family had unleashed. If I was going to fight them, I needed allies. That night, as the crickets sang outside and the house sat in suffocating silence, I called Martin. He answered on the second ring, his gravelly voice still as steady as it had been back when he was tearing corrupt businessmen apart in the courtroom. "David," he said, no pleasantries. "I've been waiting for this call." I swallowed hard. "I have proof, Martin. A forensic expert confirmed it. The deed was forged, copied from when I was sick." He let out a low whistle. "I knew Palmer's family were snakes, but this is elder abuse, plain and simple. And with Kelly's name on it?" His voice trailed off, heavy with the weight of our shared grief. He had been Elizabeth's friend, too. "I didn't approve updates," I said, "because the mind bargains when the heart can't keep up. I didn't approve anything." Palmer tucked his phone away and tried on a sympathetic tone. "The paperwork's already done." "I haven't signed any paperwork." Kelly's smile thinned. "You're overcomplicating this. We'll talk later, okay?" She turned to the strangers. "Let me show you the lake path. It's a private easement. Buyers love that." Elizabeth's laugh moved through my chest like a breeze off the water, then was gone. I blinked. "Kel," I said, gentler than the moment deserved, because that's the voice I always used when I feared I'd lose her. "This place it's your mother. It's us." "You're being dramatic," she said. "Don't make this harder." Something hot and unreal rose in my throat. I looked at Palmer. "Did you know my wife picked those floorboards? She wanted oak because she said pine was too soft for a life like ours." He pretended not to hear. He knew what her memory meant to me. "We'll build a case," he continued firmly. "Fraudulent transfer, elder exploitation, financial abuse. I'll help you every step." Something unclenched in my chest at his words. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone, but the second ally came from a place I didn't expect. 2 days later, my granddaughter Sophie showed up at my door. She stood nervously on the porch, clutching her backpack like a shield. At 16, she had Elizabeth's eyes, steady, questioning, older than her years. "Grandpa," she whispered when I opened the door, "can I come in? Mom doesn't know I'm here." My throat tightened. "Of course, sweetheart." We sat in the living room, the air heavy with the scent of the lemon polish I'd used that morning to steady my nerves. Sophie looked down at her hands, twisting the strap of her bag. "I heard them talking," she said finally. "Mom, Dad, and Grandma Rita. They were laughing about the villa, about how easy it was. Dad said you didn't even notice the money leaving." Her voice cracked. "They called you practice." I closed my eyes, my stomach turning. Practice. That word would haunt me. Sophie's hand trembled as she pulled her phone from her bag. "I recorded some of it. I didn't mean to snoop, but I knew it was wrong." She pressed play. The recording was muffled but clear enough. Palmer's voice smug and gloating. "The old man's clueless. Rita says we can move on to the next one soon. The villa was just a warm-up." Kelly's laugh followed, sharp and chilling. "He'll never fight us. He still thinks I care." I felt the room tilt. My own daughter's voice, dismissing me like garbage. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced them back. I had to stay strong for Sophie. She looked up at me, her chin trembling. "I don't want to live with them anymore, Grandpa." They're not the people I thought they were. I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. You're safe here. You'll always be safe with me. In that moment, something shifted. Kelly might have betrayed me, but Sophie was proof that not all was lost. She carried Elizabeth's spirit, her honesty, her strength. Together, with Martin's legal mind and Sophie's recordings, I had more than just proof. I had a team, and for the first time, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. But as Sophie left to return to the chaos she called home, her final words cut through me like glass. "Grandpa," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. "Mom said if you keep pushing, they'll make sure you end up with nothing, not even me." The blood drained from my face as I realized Kelly wasn't just trying to take my villa and money. She was threatening to sever me from the one person who still carried Elizabeth's light. My own daughter was willing to weaponize her child against me. It was Martin who first suggested we dig into Palmer's family's public life. "People like them can't help themselves," he said, tapping the side of his nose. "They brag. Somewhere out there, they've already left you the rope we'll hang them with." He was right. That evening, Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor with her laptop open, scrolling through Facebook. "They don't even bother hiding it," she muttered, half in disbelief, half in disgust. "Look at this." She turned the screen toward me, and my breath caught. There they were, Palmer's parents, Rita and George Hale, beaming in front of my villa's lakefront terrace, wine glasses raised as though they had conquered some kingdom. The caption beneath the photo read, "Smart investing pays off. Our dream lake house at last." My jaw clenched. Our dream lake house. Elizabeth's dream, my sweat, our years of sacrifice, reduced to a trophy for thieves. Sophie scrolled further. Post after post. Photos of the new furniture they'd paraded in. My dock strung with fairy lights. Palmer grilling on my deck as though he'd built it himself. They even posed by the old oak tree where Elizabeth once tied a hammock. They tagged people, Sophie said, her voice tight. Other clients, other investments. She pointed to the comment section where one woman gushed, "Can't wait for you to help with my uncle's property." I leaned closer, my pulse quickening. They're advertising the scam, out in the open. Martin leaned over my shoulder, letting out a low, humorless laugh. Pride before the fall. Screenshots all of this. Every word, every picture. Sophie's fingers flew over the keyboard, capturing it all. She was quick, focused. Elizabeth would have been proud. But as I watched Rita's smug smile frozen on the screen, bile rose in my throat. This wasn't just greed. This was arrogance. They were so certain of their power, their connections, their untouchability, that they flaunted their theft like a badge of honor. "They think no one can touch them," I said, my voice low. "They think I'll roll over and die quietly." "Then prove them wrong," Martin replied. We dug deeper. Sophie clicked through Palmer's profile, and there it was. Another post, this time with Kelly. My daughter stood in the villa's living room, glass of champagne in hand, her arm around Rita. The caption read, "Family first, securing our future together." My stomach turned. Family first. She used to say that when she was little, tugging at Elizabeth's apron while we cooked dinner together. Now she said it, standing beside the woman who had taught her how to steal from her own father. I rubbed my temples, trying to steady the flood of anger. But the more I saw, the harder it became to breathe. Their arrogance wasn't just insulting, it was evidence. Evidence we could use. Martin tapped the printout of Dr. Park's forensic report on the table. "We've got the forgery, we've got financial records. Now we've got them bragging in public. This is building into a case any prosecutor would salivate over." Still, a part of me recoiled. This was my daughter. Did I truly want to drag her name through the mud? To see her paraded in headlines as a thief and a fraud? But then Sophie spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Grandpa, if you don't stop them, they'll keep doing it. To other families. To people who don't have anyone to fight for them." I looked into her eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, and knew she was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about stopping predators who believed they could bleed the vulnerable dry and sip champagne while doing it. I reached for Sophie's hand and gave it a squeeze. "Then we'll fight, together." The next morning, Martin filed the screenshots with our growing case folder. The evidence was stacking high, but so were the stakes. Because while we were digging into them, they were moving against me too. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived from a law firm representing the Hales. Inside was a notice. They were finalizing the sale of the villa. Not weeks from now, not months, but in 3 days. My chest went cold as I realized we weren't just racing for justice. We were racing against the clock. If I couldn't stop them within 72 hours, Elizabeth's villa would be gone forever. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it again, each word sinking like a stone into my gut. Finalizing the sale. 3 days. That was all the time I had before the villa, my villa, Elizabeth's dream, would be sold off to strangers and vanish into someone else's portfolio. Martin cursed under his breath when he saw the notice. They're trying to outpace you. It's a classic move. Sell quick, create a new owner, make it 10 times harder to unwind in court. I set the letter down on the table, my jaw clenched. Then we stop them before it happens. But it was easier said than done. Palmer's family had lawyers on retainer, the kind who specialized in burying opponents under paperwork and technicalities. Martin and I worked late into the night, piecing together everything we had. Dr. Park's forensic report, the bank statements, Sophie's recordings, the screenshots of their arrogance plastered across Facebook. Still, evidence wasn't enough. We needed an injunction, a legal halt that would freeze the sale until a judge could hear the case. Without it, everything else would be meaningless. The next morning, we filed the motion. I watched Martin argue our case with the fire of the man I remembered from his prosecutor days, his voice echoing in the courtroom as he laid out the fraud, the forgery, the exploitation. The judge, a man with deep lines etched across his face, listened carefully, occasionally scribbling notes. For a moment, hope flickered in me. Maybe, just maybe, justice still worked. But when the opposing counsel rose, slick suit, slicker tongue, my heart sank. He painted me as a confused old man, overwhelmed by grief, lashing out at his daughter and her husband's family in desperation. He called the documents legitimate, the social media posts, family pride, the bank withdrawals, financial support, and the judge frowned. When the gavel came down, my stomach dropped. Motion denied, insufficient grounds for emergency injunction. The sale proceeds unless further evidence is presented. Insufficient. The word echoed like a death sentence. Martin leaned toward me as the courtroom emptied. Don't lose heart. We're not done yet. But I felt gutted. My knees nearly buckled as I walked out into the corridor. 3 days had shrunken to 2, and the law had just slammed the door in my face. Back at home, Sophie sat waiting, her eyes wide with fear. What happened? I didn't want to crush her spirit, but I refused to lie. The strangers had drifted out onto the terrace with the realtor, cameras still up. Sunlight found my daughter's hair, deepening the brown the way it used to when she'd sit on the dock eating orange popsicles, legs knotted like a pretzel. I used to think there was nothing I couldn't fix for her. Keys, I said, holding out my hand. House keys, now. Kelly's jaw tightened. Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. I'm protecting what's mine. What's ours, she corrected, eyes flicking to Palmer. We're a family. We make decisions together. I stared at her, at the expensive watch I'd bought for her nursing graduation, at the diamond band I helped Palmer afford with a temporary loan that was never repaid. A wave of nausea rolled through me. The judge didn't stop the sale. Her lip trembled, but she straightened, her young face hardening with resolve. Then we'll find something else, something they can't ignore. Her determination gave me strength. We dug deeper that night, every file, every receipt, every scrap of paper in my study. Martin called in favors from old colleagues. Sophie scoured the internet, digging through Palmer's social media history with a sharpness that made me both proud and afraid for her. At 2 a.m, my eyes burning from exhaustion, I caught sight of Elizabeth's photograph on the mantel. Her smile, calm and unwavering, seemed to whisper that I couldn't stop now. I owed her this fight, but the pressure was crushing. My heart pounded with every tick of the clock, each second pushing me closer to losing everything. The next morning, Sophie ran into the study, her phone in hand, her face pale. Grandpa, you need to see this. On her screen was a real estate listing, my villa. Photos taken just yesterday. Lakefront treasure, 1.2 million dirham move-in ready, available for immediate closing. The buyers weren't hypothetical anymore. They were real, interested, lining up to steal my life out from under me. I gripped the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. 2 days, 48 hours. That was all I had left. Terror clawed at my chest as I realized the villa wasn't just at risk of being sold. It was already on the market, and unless I uncovered something explosive, I'd lose Elizabeth's legacy forever. The judge's refusal still weighed heavy on my shoulders when Martin called late that night. "They've scheduled a court-mandated family mediation," he said. "One last chance to resolve things privately before the sale finalizes. Tomorrow at noon." I almost laughed. Privately? Nothing about this was private anymore. Still, Martin urged me to go. Judges like to see effort. Even if it's theater, show up. It might buy us time. So I went. The conference room was sterile, lit too brightly, its table long enough to remind me how far I'd fallen from my own daughter. Kelly sat across from me, her face carefully painted with contrition. She wore pale blue, Elizabeth's favorite color, as if the choice might disarm me. Palmer hovered beside her, his hand resting on her chair, his smirk firmly in place. Rita sat at the end of the table, like a queen holding court, her eyes cold, calculating. "Dad," Kelly began, her voice trembling just enough to seem believable. "I never wanted this to get so ugly." I stared at her, waiting. She leaned forward, clasping her hands together. "Palmer's family pressured me. They said we needed security, that you'd already given enough to me. I thought I was doing what was best. I see now how wrong that was." Her eyes glistened. Not quite tears, but close enough for an audience. Martin nudged my arm under the table, a silent warning. Stay calm. Let her play. I forced myself to breathe evenly. "So you admit the signatures were forged?" Kelly flinched, then shook her head quickly. "No, I mean, Dad, please, let's not drag this into court. We can work something out as a family." Her words were soft, rehearsed, hitting every note of remorse she thought I wanted to hear. For a fleeting moment, the father in me, the one who had once lifted her onto his shoulders to watch fireworks, who had kissed her scraped knees, wanted to believe her. But then Sophie, who had insisted on sitting quietly in the corner, tugged at my sleeve. She held her phone low, the screen angled so only I could see. A text message glowed back at me, from Kelly, sent just minutes earlier. "Keep the old fool talking until the sale closes." Almost there. The blood drained from my face. My daughter, sitting across from me with her faux tears and soft words, was still playing me, still conspiring against me, even in the middle of a court-mandated mediation. I looked up at her, my heart twisting. How many times had she used that same act on me before? How many times had I mistaken manipulation for love? Kelly reached across the table, her voice breaking just so. "Dad, can't we just forgive each other? Start fresh?" I stared at her outstretched hand. For a moment, silence hung in the room, like a blade suspended above us all. And then I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "You're good," I said quietly, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and grief. Almost convincing. Her expression flickered, the mask slipping for just a fraction of a second. Behind the painted remorse, I saw the cold calculation of a woman who had chosen greed over blood. Palmer shifted uneasily, glancing at her. Rita's lips tightened, as though she sensed something had slipped beyond her control. But Kelly recovered quickly, pressing her palms together like a supplicant. "Dad, please, just trust me." Trust. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My pulse thundered as I stared at the text Sophie had shown me, Kelly's betrayal spelled out in glowing letters. My daughter wasn't here to reconcile. She was here to distract me long enough to finish selling my life out from under me. After the mediation fiasco, I drove home in silence. Sophie curled in the passenger seat with her earbuds in, though I doubted any music could drown out what she'd witnessed. Her mother's crocodile tears, the text message that exposed the truth, it was too much for a girl her age. Martin called as soon as we pulled into the driveway. "We're out of time," he said bluntly. "If the sale goes through tomorrow, undoing it will be a nightmare. We need something that doesn't just allege fraud. We need their own mouths to confess it." My mind reeled. Confession? Palmer and Rita weren't fools. They would never sit in a deposition and admit their crimes. Kelly had grown too skilled at lying. But then Martin leaned in with a suggestion that made my pulse quicken. "A sting," he said. "We give them what they want, your surrender. We make them believe you're dropping the fight, and then we let their arrogance do the rest." The plan formed like storm clouds. We would invite them to dinner at the villa, make it seem like a reconciliation. I would hand them a fake letter of withdrawal from the case, Martin's legal Polish making it look real. And then we'd let them talk. Let them gloat. Hidden cameras would catch everything. I hesitated. The thought of walking back into that villa, of seeing them celebrate on Elizabeth's terrace, it twisted my gut. But Sophie placed her small hand on mine. "Grandpa," she whispered, "we have to. They'll never stop otherwise." Her resolve gave me strength. The next evening, the Hale family arrived at the villa in high spirits. Palmer clapped me on the back like we were old drinking buddies. "Glad you came to your senses, sir." Kelly kissed my cheek, her smile brittle but triumphant. "This is for the best, Dad. You'll see." Rita swept inside like a monarch, already commenting on her view of the lake. I sat them at the dining table, where Elizabeth once laid out feasts for birthdays and anniversaries. My stomach churned at the desecration, but I played my part. I slid the letter across the table. "I don't have the strength for war," I said, keeping my voice weary, defeated. "You win." Palmer snatched the letter, his eyes scanning it with greedy satisfaction. "Knew you'd come around." Rita chuckled, lifting her glass of wine. "We've done this a dozen times, and it always ends the same. Seniors think they can fight, but they never can." My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to remain still. Kelly leaned in, her voice low but audible. "Told you he'd fold. Dad always caves when you push hard enough." Sophie, hidden upstairs with Martin, texted me. "They're taking the bait. Cameras are rolling." I clenched my fists beneath the table, nails digging into my palms as Rita continued, oblivious to the trap closing around her. "We'll flip this place for over $1 million, she bragged. "Easy, and that's on top of the nest egg we've already drained." She winked at Kelly. "You married well, darling. Your father's grief made him blind, and we took full advantage." The room spun for a moment. My heart hammered so loud I was afraid they'd hear it. Every instinct screamed at me to leap across the table, to shout, to demand how my daughter could sit there smiling while her in-laws mocked the very years her mother had suffered. But I stayed still, because this was bigger than me, bigger than my rage. This was the evidence that would bury them. Kelly raised her glass, her smile sharp. "To family, to building our future, no matter what it takes." I stared at her, at the daughter who once clutched my hand on the dock and whispered that she wanted to be just like her mother. My throat ached with grief, but I whispered silently to Elizabeth, "This is for you." As Palmer and Rita clinked their glasses and laughed about their victory, the hidden cameras captured every damning word. My pulse raced with the knowledge that the noose was tightening, not around me, but around them. Tomorrow, the world would hear the truth. The day of the trial arrived like a thunderstorm. Heavy clouds pressed against the courthouse roof, and the air inside buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread. An old man suing his own daughter, accusing her family of elder fraud. Local reporters packed the benches, their cameras poised to catch every tear, every grimace. I stood at the plaintiff's table beside Martin, clutching Dr. Park's forensic report like a shield. Sophie sat just behind me, her small frame dwarfed by the enormity of the proceedings. She had insisted on coming. "I want to see the truth come out," she told me, her chin lifted with Elizabeth's stubborn grace. I tried to find the thread back to sense and came up with high, stupid details. A tiny scuff on the stair riser from the summer Elizabeth and I carried the piano in. The bowl by the door where Elizabeth tossed her bracelets. The faint citrus of the cleaner she loved. All of it a thin film over a new reality. The realtor pausing by the bay window snapped me out of it. She was photographing the built-ins, my built-ins. "Out," I said again, louder. The strangers pretended they didn't hear. "Kelly, I'm asking you as your father." "And I'm telling you as an adult," she said, voice flat, rehearsed. "We're in the middle of something." I took one step toward the coffee table. The Smart Coast folder lay half open, pages splayed like a bird with a broken wing. My name appeared in neat type at the top of the first sheet, my full legal name. Below it, a clause about transfer of title, then a signature, my signature. The room tipped. The bailiff called the court to order, and the trial began. Martin was a storm unleashed. He presented Dr. Park's testimony first, her calm, surgical explanation slicing through the defense's bluster. "This is not a natural signature," she said, her pointer tracing the projected image of my supposed deed. This is a forgery copied from a time when Mr. Hale was physically weakened. It was deliberate, calculated. The jury leaned forward, scribbling notes. The judge's brow furrowed. Next came the financial records, each transfer highlighted, each dollar drained cataloged. $847,000, Martin declared, his voice booming. Stolen under the guise of family support, siphoned while my client grieved his dying wife. Gasps rippled through the room. I bowed my head, letting the weight of those words settle. But it was Sophie's recordings that cut deepest. On the screen, Palmer's voice dripped with arrogance. The old man's clueless. The villa was just a warm-up. Then Kelly's laugh, cold and sharp. He'll never fight us. He still thinks I care. My daughter's words echoed in the hushed courtroom, like a curse. I felt my knees weaken, but Sophie's hand brushed my shoulder from behind, steadying me. Then Martin unveiled the final blow, the hidden camera footage from the reconciliation dinner. There was Palmer, grinning with Rita at his side, crowing about flipping the villa. There was Rita, toasting their success. And there, God help me, was Kelly, raising her glass, declaring, "To family, to building our future, no matter what it takes." The courtroom erupted. Reporters whispered furiously, pens flying. One juror covered her mouth with her hand. The defense scrambled, their polished veneer cracking. Rita shot to her feet, pointing a trembling finger at Kelly. "This was your idea!" she shrieked, her voice breaking under the weight of exposure. "You brought us into this mess!" Kelly's face blanched, her mask crumbling as cameras zoomed in. "No! You told me it was safe, that Dad would never notice." The chaos spiraled, the perfect picture of unity shattering into jagged shards for all to see. I sat frozen, the storm of emotions tearing through me. Grief, rage, vindication. This was the daughter I had raised, now unraveling in front of strangers. And yet, beneath the anguish, I felt the faint stirrings of justice. Martin leaned close, his voice a steady anchor. "We've got them, David. Hold steady." The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. His voice cut through the uproar. "This court will recess until tomorrow, but let it be clear, this evidence is overwhelming." Reporters surged forward as the bailiff cleared the room, their cameras flashing like lightning. I barely heard the questions hurled at me. All I could see was Kelly, slumped at the defense table, her face streaked with tears, not of remorse, but of fear. For the first time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, her lies couldn't shield her. My heart pounded as the courtroom emptied. The image of Kelly's crumbling facade burned into my mind. Tomorrow, the verdict would come, and with it, the final judgment on whether blood ties could survive such betrayal. The following morning, the courthouse was packed to the rafters. Reporters lined the hallways, their microphones thrust forward like spears as I walked past, with Martin and Sophie at my side. For years I had been invisible, just another grieving widower fading into the background. But now, every eye followed me, every camera caught my steps. Inside, the tension crackled like static. The jury filed in, solemn, carrying the weight of truth on their shoulders. The judge's gavel fell, and silence claimed the room. The verdict came swift and devastating. For them. The villa was returned to me immediately, the forged deed nullified. The $847,000 siphoned from my accounts ordered to be repaid in full. Palmer's parents were convicted on multiple counts of elder fraud and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Their so-called senior care consulting business was dissolved by court order, every asset seized, every penny earmarked for restitution to victims. The dominoes didn't stop there. Other families, elderly men and women I had never met, came forward in tears, their own stories echoing mine. They too had been robbed, manipulated, left hollow. Now they had a voice, and justice surged outward like a tide, sweeping through every corner of Rita's empire. I sat at the plaintiff's table, numb, listening to the sentences roll out like thunder. For each count, I expected to feel triumph, satisfaction. But what I felt was something heavier, colder, because then came Kelly, her nursing license revoked, her reputation destroyed. The court announced she would face charges of aiding and abetting fraud. Though with no prior record, prison was uncertain. Still, the stain would never wash off. I watched her as the words fell. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed somewhere in the middle distance, her face pale, her hands trembling as though she were the victim instead of the architect of my suffering. Palmer glared at her with contempt, as if blaming her for their downfall. Rita refused to meet her eyes altogether. The family first Kelly had toasted just days ago had turned into a pack of wolves tearing each other apart. And me, I felt hollow. This was what I had fought for, what I had prayed for in the dark hours of the night. Justice, vindication, and yet, watching my only child collapse under the weight of her choices, I felt no victory, only the ache of a man who had lost her long before the gavel fell. Afterward, reporters swarmed, asking how I felt. I muttered something about justice, about protecting the vulnerable, about Elizabeth's memory, but the truth burned in my chest. No sentence, no restitution could restore what I had lost in Kelly. As Martin guided me outside, Sophie clutched my arm. Her eyes shone with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "We won, Grandpa," she whispered. I nodded, but inside, I wondered, had we really won? Or had the price been too high? The courthouse doors closed behind me, the cameras flashing in the distance. I had regained my villa, my money, even my dignity, but at the cost of my daughter's soul. Justice had been served, but I couldn't shake the shadow of one question. What would remain of us as a family? The courthouse battle was over, but the war within me raged on. I should have been celebrating, yet every victory came laced with grief. The villa was mine again, the Hales were disgraced, and Kelly, my only daughter, stood stripped of her profession, her reputation, and her allies. I thought that would be the end of it. But then came the knock on my door. It was late, past 10. I opened it to find Kelly on the porch, her makeup smeared, her clothes rumpled as if she had been crying for hours. For a heartbeat, my mind flashed back to the little girl who used to run up those same steps after school, clutching her mother's hand, begging me to watch her draw or tell me about her day. But the woman standing before me was a stranger. "Dad," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please, let me in." I hesitated, then stepped aside. She moved into the living room, glancing around at the familiar furniture as though it were foreign to her now. She sat down heavily, her hands trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she began, her tone cracked but deliberate. "I thought I was protecting us. Palmer promised me security. Rita promised me a future. I didn't think you'd fight. I didn't think—" Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. I listened in silence, my jaw tight. "Please, Dad," she continued, lowering her hands, her eyes wet. "We can fix this. You can tell the press you forgive me, that this was all a misunderstanding. If you don't, I'll lose everything. My career, my daughter." Her words sharpened, desperate. "You can't take Sophie from me. Please." It was the same performance I had witnessed in mediation. The trembling voice, the watery eyes, the plea for family. Once it might have broken me. Once I would have reached across and held her, promised to make it all right. But now I knew better. I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressed play, and set it on the coffee table between us. Her own voice filled the room, cold and merciless from Sophie's recording. "He'll never fight us. He still thinks I care." Kelly froze. The blood drained from her face. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Do you hear yourself? That wasn't Palmer. That wasn't Rita. That was you. Those were your words, your laughter, your betrayal." Tears slid down her cheeks, but they felt rehearsed now, even in their rawness. "Dad, I was caught up in something bigger than me." "No," I cut her off. "You chose this. You chose greed over loyalty, manipulation over love. You used every weakness I had against me, even Elizabeth's death, even my illness." My throat tightened. "And you would have kept going until I was dead, wouldn't you?" She shook her head furiously, sobbing. "No! I hit stop on the recording and stared at her. "I want you to see who you've become. I want you to know that every tear you shed now isn't for me. It's for yourself, for what you've lost." For the first time, Kelly looked small. Not cunning, not powerful, just small. She reached across the table, her voice breaking. "Please, Dad, forgive me. I'm still your daughter." The ache in my chest threatened to break me. For a heartbeat, I heard only the lake, a hush against the rocks, steady, indifferent. My hands felt numb, my chest too tight for air. When? I asked, not sure who I was asking. Did I sign this? Kelly's eyes didn't blink. We'll talk at dinner. I don't need dinner, I need the truth. She brushed past me toward the terrace, and the linen of her dress whispered against my arm like refusal. Text me before you come next time, she said. It's respectful. Respectful. I stood alone in my own living room, the late sun laying warm stripes across the floorboards Elizabeth chose, and realized there was a second, smaller folder beneath the first, thinner, with a bank's crest embossed on the corner. I slid it out and saw a line I'd never expected to see attached to my address. SellerNet sheet. What I found next seemed almost administrative, just a neat column of fees and dates, but it was the thread that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my daughter. But I thought of Sophie upstairs, of Elizabeth's memory, of the other families who had suffered under Rita's empire. Forgiveness was no longer mine to give. I rose to my feet, leaving Kelly's hand hanging in the air. For years she had held the power, over my grief, my finances, my heart. But now the balance had shifted. For the first time, she was the one begging, and I was the one who would decide her fate. After Kelly left my house that night, her sobs still echoing faintly on the porch, I sat in silence. The living room was heavy with ghosts, Elizabeth's laughter, Sophie's small feet running across the rug, even Kelly's voice from years ago when she'd beg for just one more story before bed. But those memories were fractured now, scarred by betrayal. And as much as it hurt, I knew one truth. I could not let this cycle of exploitation swallow me, or anyone else, ever again. That was when the idea took root. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. It was about turning the ashes of betrayal into something greater. I called Martin the next morning. I want to restructure everything, I told him. The villa, my finances, all of it. I want to make sure no one can ever use me, or any senior, this way again. Martin was quiet for a long moment. Then his voice carried a rare note of pride. That's bigger than revenge, David. That's legacy. We began the process of establishing a foundation, the Elizabeth Foundation, named in honor of my late wife. Its mission, to protect elder fraud victims, provide legal support, and fund investigations into schemes like Rita's, so no one would have to fight alone. And here was the poetic twist. The seed money for the foundation came from the seized assets of Palmer's family. Their cars, their accounts, their ill-gotten real estate, all of it liquidated, redirected into building a shield for the very people they preyed upon. Sophie's face lit up when I told her she would serve as the first trustee. Me? She whispered wide-eyed. You, I said firmly. You've already shown more courage and integrity than most adults. This foundation needs someone with your heart. She hugged me then, her thin arms clutching around my shoulders, and for the first time since Elizabeth's death, I felt a spark of hope for the future. The local news caught wind of the story almost immediately. Headlines blared, "From victim to advocate, retired businessman fights elder fraud." One reporter, a young woman with a determined face, dubbed me the Villa Vigilante. The nickname stuck. But what mattered wasn't the attention. It was the ripple effect. Calls poured in from across the state. Families who had been robbed, widows too ashamed to speak until now, men who had thought themselves alone in their suffering, and for each one, the Elizabeth Foundation offered a lifeline. I should have felt triumphant. In a way, I did. But beneath the pride lingered a hollow ache. Kelly's silence was deafening. She hadn't reached out again since that night, and though part of me longed for reconciliation, I knew better. Her choices had carved a canyon between us. Whether it could ever be bridged was no longer up to me. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, I stood on the villa's terrace, the same spot where Elizabeth and I had once dreamed of retirement together. Now it was different. The villa wasn't just a home, it was headquarters. From here, others would be protected. From here, justice would ripple outward. And yet, as the breeze carried the faint scent of pine and water, I whispered into the fading light, "Liz, we built this dream together. I lost so much along the way, but maybe I've found a new purpose." As I looked across the lake, the reflection of the villa shimmering in the water, I realized I was no longer just a victim clawing for revenge. I had become something else entirely. A guardian, a fighter, a man who had turned betrayal into a weapon for justice. But the final test remained. Could I truly heal the wounds Kelly had left behind? The villa was quiet that morning. the kind of quiet Elizabeth used to love. I walked slowly through its rooms, my hand brushing over the polished wood of the banister, the worn rug by the fireplace, the wide windows overlooking the lake. For a long time, this place had been a symbol of betrayal, every corner echoing with Kelly's deception, every wall scarred by my grief. But now, it felt different. The Elizabeth Foundation was up and running. Sophie had taken to her role as trustee with astonishing grace, balancing her schoolwork with meetings, her youthfulness tempered by a wisdom she must have inherited from her grandmother. She was proof that the line of love and loyalty had not ended with Kelly, that the next generation could choose a different path. Reporters still called me the Villa Vigilante. Though I never liked the name, I wasn't a vigilante. I hadn't taken the law into my own hands. I had fought within the system, tooth and nail, and proved that justice was possible, even if it required patience, humiliation, and the pain of exposing my own child. Sometimes at night, I wondered what Kelly was doing, whether she lay awake, replaying the choices that led her here, whether she hated me, or herself, or both. A part of me ached for the daughter I had once known, the one who tied ribbons in Elizabeth's hair, who fell asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. But I had learned that longing could not rewrite the past. Forgiveness was not the same as blindness. And though I would always love her as my child, I could no longer allow her into the place where she had once drawn blood. Instead, I poured my energy into the work ahead. The villa, once a sanctuary for only Elizabeth and me, was now headquarters for something larger. The front room had been converted into an office, walls lined with files of active cases. The dining table bore not just meals, but strategy sessions. And on the terrace, where Elizabeth and I once dreamed of our golden years, I now stood with survivors of fraud, listening to their stories, promising them they were not alone. On the anniversary of Elizabeth's passing, Sophie and I planted a tree by the dock, a young oak, its branches reaching toward the sky. "So, her roots are here forever," Sophie whispered, tears in her eyes. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, my throat too tight to speak. That evening, as the sun sank low and painted the lake in gold, I sat on the terrace with Sophie beside me. The breeze rustled the leaves of the new oak, carrying with it the faintest memory of Elizabeth's laughter. "Grandpa," Sophie said softly, "do you ever regret fighting? It was so hard. You lost so much." I stared out across the water, letting her words settle. "I regret what I had to see," I admitted. "I regret knowing how far Kelly fell. But fighting? No, I don't regret that. Because if we hadn't, others would still be suffering, and your grandmother's dream would have died with her." Sophie nodded, her eyes glistening. I took a long breath, the weight in my chest finally lifting after months of suffocating darkness. This villa isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who needs it, everyone who's been hurt the way I was. And maybe that's how we heal, not by erasing the pain, but by using it to build something stronger. The lake shimmered under the fading light, the horizon stretching wide and unbroken. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not because the wounds were gone, but because they had given me purpose. Elizabeth had wanted this villa to be a place of family, of love, of legacy. And though that dream had been twisted, nearly destroyed, I had reforged it into something even she would be proud of. As I stood on the terrace, the oak tree's young leaves swaying in the evening breeze, I realized that betrayal had not defined me. Justice had, love had, purpose had. And though my daughter's shadow would always linger, the light of Elizabeth's legacy and Sophie's future burned brighter. Palmer was the first to speak, his smirk still in place, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. "Mr. Wallace," he said, deliberately formal, "we appreciate your concern, but everything is under control." His hand rested casually on the Smart Coast folder, like a predator staking its claim over prey. "Under control?" My voice broke sharper than I intended. "This is my villa, my home. You don't get to stand here and—" Kelly cut me off, sharp as glass. "Dad, stop embarrassing yourself." She crossed her arms and leaned on the banister, the picture of casual disdain. "We're handling the sale. It's for the best." The words landed like a fist in my chest. "The best? For who?" "For everyone," she said. Her tone mimicked the therapists Elizabeth used to visit during chemo, cool, professional, detached. "You're too old to manage this place. You barely come here anymore. It's wasted on you." I stared at her, blinking, as if I hadn't heard correctly. Too old? Wasted? I built this villa with my own hands. I laid the foundation stone the year Kelly turned 6. I could still see her playing in the mud with Elizabeth, squealing when the lake water crept too high up the bank. This place wasn't wasted. It was alive with memories, with love. Kelly, I whispered, forcing my voice steady the way Elizabeth once did when talking me down from rage. This villa isn't just wood and stone. It's your mother. It's us. It's everything we built together. Her eyes narrowed, lips twisting into something that looked too much like Palmer's grin. You're being dramatic. Don't make this harder. Palmer finally stepped forward, placing a hand on my daughter's shoulder like he owned her. The paperwork's already done, he said smoothly. The deed is signed, notarized. You don't need to worry. A surge of ice ran down my spine. I haven't signed anything. Palmer tilted his head, that smirk curdling into condescension.